Good morning. Ayin Beis, Volume 3, page 1281. And I was abruptly came to an end abruptly right before we finished the paragraph. So let me go over what we learned yesterday and finish up the paragraph and sum up this section. So we're talking about the dvarim, elu hadvarim. These are the things, these are the items that a person eats from their fruit in this world, and their keren, and the principle of it is preserved and intact in the world to come. So the way he's teaching it, explaining it, is that in this world, we're getting fruits. It's not the tree itself, it's not the keren, the principle, which is the full gili of Shem Yudke, the undiluted, the unmasked Yudke of the gili atzmi of schar mitzvah, of the reward of a mitzvah, which is the gili atzmi of God's pure desire. But we're getting, so that's la'asad love, will be the full revelation. But we get a me'enza, something similar, a semblance of it now, in these four things: kibud ava'im, gemilas chasadim, hava shalom ben adam lechaverei, and finally Talmud Torah keneged kulam. As I mentioned yesterday, this is a Gemara in Kedushin, spells out these four. In Shabbos, he discusses Rashi, especially Rashi, as I mentioned, daf kuf chav zayin amid aleph at the bottom, and the top of kuf chazayin amid beis, and Rashi spells out, the Gemara is saying that the other 6 are included in these 10. I looked it up. It's not exactly the same 10 that we enumerate in davening in the morning from Masechta Peah, but that needs to be looked into further what the distinctions are. But regardless, what he's discussing here, these 4, and he explained Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, is because Talmud Torah, which also draws down from Atzmus Ein Sof into Ishtalshalus, that's what Torah is, but also it includes all the other 3. That's why it's called Keneged Kulam, because it encompasses them. And he explained, first, Kibud Ava'im, because Torah is written Torah and oral Torah is father and mother, and the Kibud of it is drawing down Torah Lishma from Atzmus Ein Sof into Torah. And he also explained, Yeshlemer, that above, that the Eibishter is above the Eibishter is higher than any relationships. Even though it says the Eibishter is Av and Aim, Avinu and Aim, and nevertheless it also says Yesh Echad Ve'en Sheni Le Gam Ben Va'ach, that God is beyond any type of definition, even of father and mother. So Pshat is, we're drawing from Atzmus Ein Sof, which is higher than any identity, into Chachma Bina or into Abba Imma of written Torah and oral Torah. Okay. Yeah, Ilus Kol Ilus Atzmus Ein Sof. That's Kibudav. And that's Esek Torah after the Avarabba B'chol Meidech. Right. And same thing, Torah is Chesed. So he just says it in a short line. So in other words, Torah is connected to Gemilas Chasadim, that idea of drawing down from Chesed of Arich, which is also Chesed Bligvul, unlimited flow. And finally, the final thing is that Torah also creates peace, Shalom, ben Adam L'Chavere. What is Adam L'Chavere? We said before it's Arich and Zohar Ampin, Arich Ampin and Zohar Ampin. So here he brings Torah is Yasa Shalom, Kol Ezek B'Torah Masim Shalom, V'Pamalia Shal Mailo, Pamalia Shal Mata. And L'Kutei Torah, he says that's the joining of Yudke and Vovke, and the joining of the divine soul and the animal soul. And then the final piece, which I'm going to read now again, I'm reading 5 lines from the bottom of the paragraph, the middle paragraph. On page 1281, he says, V'zehu shebe'ela advarim, and this is he's summing up. And this is that what it means, that these matter, these things, these items, Adam eichel pereseim be'elam hazeh me'ein elam haba, that a person eats from the fruit, benefits from the fruit, me'ein elam haba, rather, similar to it is in the future. Va'agashbi, and here he spelled out, Remember that the mitzvahs bring down a flow, we said, a shefa and a bracha gashmis for the whole world. He discussed that at length, or relatively at length, on page 1277 and 1278. That's like the neshama of the guf. So just like when a person's awake, the neshama is energizing and vitalizing the body, the same thing, mitzvahs vitalize the world. Explained on page 1278, 1278. That's all mitzvahs. So now he's saying, the gashmi, shanimshach midvarim elu, the physical benefits, the physical blessings that are drawn and generated by these four items, these four things, these four inyonim, these four items, they're higher than other hashpahs gashmi. Because remember, till now we learned what it is beruchnius. That beruchnius, these four dvarim, these four matters, these four items, what they do is they draw from a level that's like a olam haba gili. But how does that manifest in gashmis? So now he's saying it also has effect, affects the gashmis differently, in a far higher way and greater than other hashpahs gashmi, which would also include other mitzvahs. And he gives an example like the man. Lechem and hashamayim compared to lechem and ours. Both of them are hashpah gashmis. They both fed the people, feed people. They both sustain us, and they manifest in a physical form, but they're very different. And the man is gamba gashmi. It is a lechem that's completely absorbed, which means it doesn't have any elements of a waste. So it's a blessing that comes without any side effects, if you wish, without any manifestation in the so-called klipas nega of this world. As we learned at length, what man is compared to lechem min haaretz. It's like das elyon we learned in volume 2, as opposed in contrast to das tachten of lechem min haaretz. U'kamoy kain, he says, hashpa'as hagashmim she'odam meichel pereseim be'elam hazeh. So when you say you eat the fruit be'elam hazeh, yes, it's a taste from l'asad lave, but it also manifests in elam hazeh. A person is actually benefiting from these fruit through these four matters, these four items. So the same thing, these ashbaz gasu who she'ein be'em pseilus, they have no waste. The hainu she'helach b'mokim teiv u'b'inyan gedusha. That means they go and they're directed into a good place and only in matters of holiness. Like it says elsewhere. And he doesn't elaborate. Basically saying that these mitzvahs are unique, that the bracha they give in Gashmis doesn't have any unikas achetzenim, doesn't say those words, but it does not give any side effects or any elements that can give food and sustenance to the negative. When you eat Gashmis dika food, first of all, it has waste on a physical level, but also in a deeper level, you could also indulge in it. It could also have other things that also feed the negative forces. A person eats, even if they make a bracha and it's kosher, it could still cause all kinds of things. They can do it in an indulgent way. They can do it in like a zel of a seva, as he explains in Tanya. Whereas these mitzvahs, which are tevel shemayim, tevel brias, like he said, they're both good for heaven and good for earth. And he uses the word toiv, that's why I'm referring to it, toiv. But it's a toiv that is only in mokim tev, in yonei gedusha. Now, of course, you could ask the question, 1 second, can a person give gemilas chasadim and also have a side effect, give it to the wrong person or in the wrong manner? You know, kibud aveim, its very definition sounds like you're honoring your parents. How could anything go wrong from that? Talmud Torah, the same thing, especially we're talking about Talmud Torah, Lishma. And Havah Shalom Ben Adam L'Chavere is a peaceful thing. But Gemilas Chasadim, you could argue maybe there could be something. But clearly he's talking about a Gemilas Chasadim that's coming from a very pure place, because he said clearly it's coming from Arich Ampin. So it means it's not a Gemilas Chasadim that has room for a Unika. There is ability to give tzedakah and Gemilas Chasad, which has also can create and can also feed something that's not holy. But here he's clearly not speaking about that level. That's my speculation. He doesn't say this explicitly. I would have to find the Kamesh Kosim Kamacha where the Rebbe Rashab or Chassidus talks about this topic, but he clearly says that the Ashpaz Gashmim are unique to these four items, that they are like the man that does not leave Ein Behem Pselis, and which means that their energy that's generated goes only B'mokim Tev and in Yoni Kedusha. That's what he clearly says. And with this, he concludes.
How is the man good in Olam Haba?
One sec. And with this, he concludes this whole section of Schar Mitzvah, which explained all the questions that we asked. Number one, Schar Mitzvah B'Ha'al Maleka, what does it mean there's no reward in this world? When we see there's reward in this world, you have reward in Gan Eden. She explained it's reward, but it's not the full the reward. When it says in that Chazal, it's talking about the full revelation of the Ikra Mitis Schar Mitzvah, which will be La'asad Lave. We also understand what is the Schar Mitzvah in this world, even in all mitzvahs. And now finally, we also understand why the Chazal spell out these items that Eichel Peh is saying, because they do have unique quality in drawing down a taste of, a similar semblance of the Gili that will be in Elam Haba La'asad Love. And this does conclude a section, because you'll see in the next paragraph, he already goes into, going to go back to ask a question on what we learned earlier. But I'll stop here now, if anybody wants to ask anything.
Yeah, the man has in Lasad Love something special. I can't, I mean...
What's the question?
It's obvious that the man is good for this world, Olam Hazeh, but Lasad Love, what kind of specialty does that give? I mean, I mean,
not sure. You're asking me if there'll be man in the future,
or whatever. What does it mean in Lasad Love? This type.
He doesn't speak about Lasad. He says the man when that fell in the wilderness.
Yeah, he said both. These are the ones that have both.
What he's giving an example how you can have Ashpa Gashmis that's higher than just a regular blessing. And the example is like the man.
I thought these were the four.
The man is an example
both worlds
of a transmission that comes in the physical world that is higher than other blessings. And I gave the example between bread of heaven and bread of earth. That's an example. He says, Kamoy Haman, Al Derech Haman. He's giving an example that these four things draw down energy that does not have waste and only goes in a place of goodness and holiness. Similar to the man. He didn't say these four are the man. The man is something that happened in the Midbar. Is the man a taste of La'asad Lavi? Yes, it's also a taste. We learned the three meals on Shabbos, that the third meal especially is a taste that's something higher than Birurim. The man, when you eat bread, regular bread from earth, there's Birurim. You have to digest it and refine it and separate it. That whole Aveda that we learned about in volume 2. The man is either a birur oichel metaychechel, like you said, a higher birur, or no birur altogether. So in that sense, the man itself is also a taste of La'asad Lavi. But regarding our discussion, he's talking about four things. It's a Gemara. There are four things we eat from the fruit in this world, and he's explaining that fruit is a greater, he says, understood?
What is the trouble in Gemilas Chasadim? Even if sometimes there are some people that are having it with the wrong intention, but the act itself is a good
so
thing.
No problem. I was just trying to qualify in case somebody could say that this mitzvah, but it's fine. I mean, I could see a scenario where somebody does it in a way that can create a unique sachitzenim. But I answered because here Gemilas Chasadim is not Chesed of Avram, which can lead to Yishmael. This is Chesed of Arechampim, which is higher than that. That was the point I was making. But fine, I'm just trying to explain why these four items don't have pselis and only go b'mokim teva b'nyani kedusha. He doesn't really elaborate also, as well in details about it. I mean, even Torah, you could say if you learn Shalei Lishma, it becomes Samovis. Samovis is pretty much pselis. But he's not learning, he's talking about Torah Lishma. That was the point. Okay. Any other questions?
I have a couple questions. Well, first, even on Gemilas Chasadim, even if it's coming from Arechanpin, like you were saying before, if someone gives more than 20% tzedakah, for example, then it's bizbuz, it's a waste. So there's a situation where someone could be extremely generous and give half or more, all their money away. Their husband does it, and he comes home and his wife divorces him. What did you just do? So,
Well, first of all, a wife divorcing for that, I don't know if that exactly.
I'm exaggerating.
Anyway, but what's your point? So we're not talking about that. We're talking about
you said
Chassadim.
I know, no, aim solist. You said there could be no way. So it's a makom tov. It's
I explained. So I explained because we're talking about Gemilas Chassadim from Arich that has a certain purity because it's coming from even higher than a Chesed of Avram, which did lead to Yishmael, Yotzim and Yishmael. You're confirming what I said, or you're asking something?
I think. Well, I guess. How do you say that whether
this is
something
not
is?
I already explained. This is not tzedakah.
I
explained that in the previous class. This is Gemilas Chassadim.
Okay. Second question, and forgive me, I'm not going to have the right words.
I actually spoke about this. That tzedakah is given in a limit. But by the way, the Alter Rebbe says that even tzedakah, when it's something's negei b'nefesh, kol shel adam yitin ba'ad nafshe, a person will give more than 20% as well, and that's also fine. There's plenty of explanations on that. So just for the record, there's also that. It depends whether the Baal Shem Tov said, if it's a bizbuz to you, if you feel you're just squandering, yes. But if it's negei b'nefesh, it's not bizbuz. But anyway,
okay.
That's a different discussion regarding Gemilas Chassadim. Generally, is higher than tzedakah. It's the highest. Yeah.
Okay. Second question, and I can't find the words
Just
right now.
For the record, the Gemara in Sukkah says tzedakah is la'anim, Gemilas Chassadim is la'anim and la'ashirim. Just to give one distinction between them. One is just for poor, the one is for poor and the wealthy. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Second question. I can't find the right exact words here, but the notion that the Talmud Torah, how does it have this Ochel Perotem Ba'olam Hazeh? And we talked about essentially, I think it was even, I'm not sure if it was Atzmus or Arich, very high level, was being drawn into the world by learning Torah Lishma, right? That's what we said, I think.
You said it right here. You can see it. He says it on line 6 and on line 8. He says it clearly, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I'm having a little bit of a conceptual problem. I mean, Torah is the Ratzon Hashem. It contains the Eibishter. So how do you, let me say it very, very balabatish, a very rough
I
way.
got the question. I have the question. The answer
how do you
is,
draw God into God? Right? That's the question.
I understand the question, but I already anticipated it and answered it in the previous classes. First of all, I referred everybody to volume 1, where it's discussed at length what Torah Lishma means. So the fact that there's Torah Lishma, there's also Torah Shalei Lishma. So right there you see, is there a God that's Shalei Lishma? It's not drawing God into God. Torah is not God. There's only one God, Hashem Echad. God manifested himself in Torah. It's Karaisa v'Kutche Brichu Kul Echad. But then the Torah goes downward into this world. As he explains in Tanya, chapter 4 and 5. The Torah manifests itself and goes down levels. It always retains its godliness. But when the human being learns it, you could also learn Torah for destructive purposes. The Gemara talks, I just said that the Gemara talks about someone learning Torah that becomes toxic. So Torah can be used and learned in very negative ways. So the point is, when you can learn Torah for your own selfish interest that I explained. You can learn Torah even to fill your soul, or you can learn Torah, as I explained, I brought from chapter 10 in Tanya, and I mentioned also the first volume. I'm not saying, I have no problem repeating what I said, but I did discuss this. I just want you to know. And the point being that there is the highest level of Torah, Torah L'Shema, where you're learning not l'shem any other reason, but you're drawing down from the purest of godliness in Torah. Not just Torah wisdom or Torah's helping you in your life. Those are all nice virtues, But the ultimate, like he says in chapter 10 in Tanya about the tzaddik, is to draw down elokus into atzmus into Torah. There's a whole discussion in the Sefer HaBor that David HaMelech was mechaber ein sof, atzmus ein sof with Torah. So there's a lot of levels of learning Torah, and Torah itself can be learned in many different ways.
Okay, I got it. By the way, I heard all the prior things you said, but those you could hear what you said there as not learning Torah properly. There's a way to learn Torah, but
there's more than that. He said also there's Torah as it manifests in a father and mother, written Torah and oral Torah, and there's how the Abish is higher than Avicha v'Imecha. He makes that also very clear here, right? So you see two levels in Torah. So Kabbalah des Avicha v'Imecha is Torah itself has a dimension where it manifests as God manifests as a father and a mother. And then there's a level of the Eibishter that's higher than father and mother, and you're connecting Atzmus Ein Sof higher than the father mother as it manifests Torah through Abba v'Imma.
Thank you. Got it. 100%. Thank you.
To put it in different terms, and just again, it's not mechanics, it's simple in the sense, when you look at Atzilus we say is Iyu v'chayu echad, Iyu v'gamu echad, right? All of Atzilus is godliness. So then why do we say that there's higher levels? Are there higher levels in godliness? The answer is yes. Because godliness manifests in Atzilus in a structure. Chachma, Bina. It's a divine structure. It's not like Chachma and Bina in Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, but it's a structure. And Keser is higher than the structure of Atzilus. And when you're Mechaber and say that Chachma and Bina, the whole discussion of the last 50 pages, that we're elevating the midas of Atzilus, and we're elevating the Chachma, the Meichin of Atzilus, all the way to where? To gaze at Arich and Atik. It's the same idea. Elikus is already there, Chachma and Bina, but it's more either Yichud Chitzeni, the outer dimension of Chachma and Bina, as it relates to existence, even if it's the inner dimension, but the inner dimension still has an identity, and then it's all looking upward and connecting the transcendent with the immanent, or you can say the Makif and the Pnimi, or the higher dimensions of the divine that's beyond structure with the divine within structure, which is so much the whole interface of Ayin Beis. We learned at the end of volume 2. Yes. Havaya hu Elikim. Havaya and Elikim are also two names of God. So you don't say God is God. Okay. It's the God that is beyond existence is becoming one and revealed through the God that relates to existence. So it's all the same idea, just in different levels here and there. So
no, I pushed you and you gave a beautiful answer.
I'm not speaking just to you, by the way. I'm speaking to everybody. Like we say, this is not a class one-on-one. This is meant to be explained ideas to everyone here.
Oh, of course. So one last question, follow-up. In order to be mamshich, let's say atzmus, or some higher level of godliness into Torah, when you learn Torah, does that mean just you sitting and learning with the Sefer and between you and the Sefer and it's in your head, you're not even saying the words aloud? Or do you need to say it aloud? Like, in other words, just conceptualize, putting something in your brain, lishma, lishma.
He says here explicitly that it's la'achre ha'avar rabba b'chol moedecha. It's a learning Torah that's coming and following.
I see, deep passion.
Through that you have a deep emotional connection and attraction and being absorbed with godliness on the level of b'chol moedecha.
So I see.
It's not an intellectual experience alone.
Got it. Thank you. Shkoyach. So you're elevating your neshama, so to speak, or your whole being into a higher level of godliness.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Sorry, I felt like I was cross-examining you, Rabbi. I apologize, but you're giving me good answers. It's all good.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I think I'm thinking it's fascinating how the Rebbe chose these, was it 4 of these mitzvahs, 5? And that they're so unique in Torah that they bring down this incredible level of Olam Haba, Gilui Olam Haba in our world. I was just wondering, would you speculate?
Remember, the Rebbe did not choose them. This is a Gemara in Kedushin that chose them. And the Rebbe is just explaining them.
But as you said, aren't there different enumerations?
He's explaining this Gemara. It's a question on the Gemara, why the Gemara chooses these 4. But I just want to clarify, it's not the Rebbe Rashab chose 4. The Gemara talks about these explicitly, these four.
So that answers my question, because I wanted to know if you expected it, but I guess the question is on the Gemara, not on the Rebbe. Why tefillah is
That's
not...
what I said. You can go, that can require some research. As I mentioned, the Gemara in Shabbos says other 6 are included in these 4. That's, look in Rashi on top of page 1220, Kuf Chav Ayin Beis in Shabbos. And then you have to go to Masechta Peah, and I'm sure the commentaries talk about this, because it's an obvious question. Why one place it says these numbers, these ones. As I said, in Shabbos, he definitely covers why the 6 are included in these 4. So these 4 are definitely central ones. And the other 6 in Shabbos are subcategories of them. The Peah one I didn't look into, but I am sure that it's discussed as well.
Okay, because it was obvious to me that the world stands on 3 pillars, Torah, Tefillah, and Tzedakah. This includes 2 of them, but Tefillah is not mentioned here. But you're saying it's not a question of the Rebbe Shab, not the question of my...
Not at all, not at all, yeah. You have to place the question where it belongs, yeah.
Thank you.
First of all, he's not talking about the world standing on pillars here. He's talking about the world eating from the fruits of Elam Haba today. It's a different statement. He's not talking about pillars. The world stands on Shabbos too, and on so many other mitzvahs. So it's not the question of the power of other mitzvahs. The question here is discussion of these 4 being unique in the Gili of Elam Haba today. That's the focus here. Eichel Mepeir is saying. Eichel Peir is saying, Elam Haba. Okay? Okay. Any other things you want to clarify? Okay, so this comes to a conclusion of the whole discussion of reward, Elam Haba, Gan Eden, Elam Haza, and the different dimensions of it all. So the next paragraph is going to go back to a question that the Rebbe Rashab clearly feels has not fully been answered. And let me just preface it by taking us back to what he's going to refer to. If you recall, just taking you back to this page. Let's go back. On page 1265, and later, the Rebbe Rashab said that Simcha Shal Mitzvah and the Amshacha that mitzvahs draw down is through the Hagdama of Ava Rabba, Ava B'Tainugim, and Ava B'Chol Meidecha. Like you just mentioned earlier about Torah. Now, we understand that you can't just have Maisa mitzvahs. In order to have Giluyim, you need Kavanah. We learned that clearly, to bring it out in a revealed way. The action of the mitzvahs are critical. Without that, you have nothing. Because that's what the Eibishter wants. He wants physical action of mitzvahs in this world. So if you just have kavanah and no ma'isa mitzvahs, you don't have any hamshach. That was very clear on page 1264 and throughout. But then he kept saying, we also need the kavanah mitzvahs. And part of the kavanah is the Ava Rabba and the Chol Meidecha and the Ava B'Tainugim and the Simcha Shal Mitzvah. And he said you need both because one draws the etzem and one reveals. He also said that you need the Hagdama of Ava, of this Ava. So he's going to ask a question now. Since mitzvahs are like the kelim that go to the Rishimu, that's rooted in Atzmas higher than Oyer, so why is it necessary to have this Ava Rabba that he's talking about here? So he says, and now, we need to still understand something. You need to still understand kol ikar ha'inyan shenizbar le'il, that the primary underlying point, when you say kol ikar ha'inyan, meaning we said many things, but what going back to the initial question, the initial statement needs the very axiom or the very foundation of what we learned. Kol ikar ha'inyan, all the primary point that was made, that was discussed earlier, the hamshachas mitzvahs, the mitzvahs for dafka the agdamas aveda b'chinas ava rabba the b'chol meidecha. that we said that the hamshacha of the mitzvah requires dafke through the preparation akdama, that first we have the work, the aveda of Rabba, the great love, in a level of b'chol moedecha. Remember, that was such a critical point when he spoke about how the midas catapult the meichin all the way to the levels of arich and atik and so on. So he says, Lama loiti hamshacha de mitzvos bilvad. Why should the hamshacha not take place through the mitzvahs alone without this hagdama? Let's, for argument's sake, a person does mitzvahs. God told him to do mitzvahs. Why is it so critical to have this love of b'chol moedecha? Why can't the mitzvahs themselves draw it down? Now, of course, we're going to immediately say, didn't the Rebbe Rashab himself say, because it won't be begili? He said that explicitly on page 1264 at the bottom. He said, if you don't have the simcha. And then later he said the same thing with the ava on page 1265. And further. And then he actually asked the question the other way around. If you look on the bottom of page 1266, the Rebbe Rashab said, how can we reach atzmus through simcha shel mitzvah? And that's when he answered, because mitzvahs are kelim. Even though they're kelim, the kelim are rooted in the etzem. So it sounds like he's going back now and asking the question the other way around. Okay, you explained to me that mitzvahs draw the etzem, but why do you need more than the mitzvahs? Now, as I said, we could answer because you need the gili, but clearly Rebbe Rashab is not satisfied with that. And we'll probably see why, not probably, I'm sure we'll see why in a few moments as he elaborates on this. The mitzvahs themselves, when you take lulav, an esrog and lulav, or any other mitzvah, or even the mitzvahs we talked about here, or all mitzvahs, there's the Ratzon Elyon. That is actually manifesting God's desire. The mitzvah is not just a logical law, a civil law that human beings came up with, that we should be kind to each other. It's a mitzvah in the Torah to do that, which means it's a Ratzon Elyon. Ve'en b'chinas Ratzon Atzmi, and that's a Ratzon Atzmi, which means it's a core desire reflecting the very core of the Eibishter. What's a Ratzon Chitzeni? Ratzon Chitzeni is building the world. Asar Maimoris. You're building the world in order to do mitzvahs in this world and transform it into a dira b'tachteni. So it's a means. It's a Ratzon, we learned. It's a Ratzon, but it's a Ratzon Chitzeni because it's a means to an end. And that's why it comes from the Eir of Elikus, the Ratzon. But Chitzeni is a Ratzon. Sometimes the expression is used. Like he says, Ratzon Chitzeni. But a mitzvah is not a means. The mitzvah is the Ratzon itself. That's what the Eibishter wants. U'kamoishin is barley il, as was explained earlier, Dibra Maskal Tiku Aleph. This goes back to volume 1. The first Tiku, page 393, he says. Okay. U'matzrichim lezeh hagdoma ha'aved b'chol meidecha. And why do we then need a preparation? Hagdoma, first you need Ava b'chol moedecha to get to this level. That's the question. Okay, in the parentheses, he adds more to the question, some more details. And similarly, or so too, the general idea that was explained earlier, the yichud pnimi da'ava, that the inner yichud pnimi of Abba v'Imma, who are yedei avedus haneshama ben Mesiras Nefesh dafka, it's through the work of the neshama Mesiras Nefesh, right? He mentioned that as well. I forgot to mention Mesiras. Okay, saying it now, good. If you want to know where that is, I believe that was on maybe. I have to find the page, but it's in the similar pages, 1266, 1267, somewhere 1268. But regardless,
bottom of page 53.
1253?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. That's right. But also later. The Gila Sherish Mokan Shai Debba Bimsus knows. Yeah, Negele B'Pnimius Nafshe, correct. The whole piece that's Negele B'Pnimius Nafshe. Remember, the whole Ava completely consumes him to the point of Mesiras Rotzen, Mesiras Nefesh. Good. So also that idea that Yichud Pnimi is achieved through the Aveda of the Neshama Mesiras Nefesh Dafka, Mashenka de Teira Mitzvos Levad. By contrast, if you just do Teira Mitzvos alone without Mesiras Nefesh, Mamshichim Rak Yichud Zun, you only draw down the union of Zoh and Malchus, the Yichud Chitzeni Dava, and the outer union of Chacham and Bin, of Abba ve'Imma, Kamesh Kosev, or Kamesh Kosev Ba'abir v'Nigdashti, like he explains in the Maimer, the Bir v'Nigdashti, which was cited a number of times earlier. It's clearly a fundamental piece. And that is, I'll tell you where that is. That goes back all the way to the beginning of here. On page 1236. On page 1236, he brought the Bir v'Nigdashti, and then he brought it again a few times. And I referred to it a few times back and forth, where he said very clearly this idea. If you look 2/3 down the page, you'll see it. He says, I mean, halfway down the page. So bottom line is that Teira Mitzvos alone is only Yichud of Zun or Yichud Chitzeni. Same question. Seemingly not understood. Since mitzvahs on their own is the core of Ratzon Elyon, even without Mesiras Nefesh. Heim b'chinas kelim, v'akelim. I'm sorry, I skipped. Lama einam mamshichim b'chinas yichud pnimi dava idei mitzvos levad. So why don't they draw down the inner union of Chacham and Bin, of Abba ve'Imma, through the mitzvahs alone? And clearly he's saying this because it's not just a matter of gilui that Mesiras Nefesh is revealing. Mesiras Nefesh is a very deep avodah. It's not just revealing. Simcha shal mitzvah, you could say simcha is you're doing the mitzvah. You could do it mechanically. You could do it with great joy. But here he's talking about something that you need to require that the person be completely consumed with the love of B'chol Meidecha, or like he says now, Mesiras Nefesh. So why can't the mitzvahs themselves achieve that without this? The question in general is about Avera B'chol Meidecha regarding the Ratzon Atzmi. I'm sorry, regarding the Hamshachas mitzvahs in general, and specifically now in this parenthesis talking about the Yichud Primi, Yichud Chitzeni. Why do you need the Mesiras Nefesh element? Why can't the mitzvahs alone achieve all these goals, since all these can generate it themselves? Because since the mitzvahs are Ratzon Elyon, the Ratzon Atzmi of the Eibishter himself.
The idea of Mitzvahim is mitzvahs without the Avos B'chol Me'odcho. So that means that it's not fair. Most of the Yidden are doing it without the Avos B'chol Me'odcho.
You're asking a question on his question? What are you asking?
No, a question on the idea that without B'chol Me'odcho you don't have Hamshachah.
That's what he said. He's been discussing this for the last 20 pages.
Yeah, but Mitzvahim is, you're not making an Avos B'chol Me'odcho by the people by asking them to put a film.
So
there's no Hamshachah if they're doing it?
Who says there's no Hamshachah? The question is whether it's Hamshachah Atzmis. And that's what he's asking now. Why can't mitzvahs alone do it without that? You're just asking the question in different terms. He's saying, why can't mitzvahs do it without the Ava B'chol Meidecha, the Ava Rabba, without the Mesiras Nefesh? Mitzvahs themselves draw Ratzon Elyon. You're really asking what the Rebbe Shab is asking. Right? Correct? Or you have it seems to me that's what you're asking.
And this is in general, you know that.
No, but I'm saying you're asking the same question that Rabbi Rashab is asking. Am I correct or not? Or unless I misunderstand what you're saying.
No, I don't think so. I'm asking in general, the idea.
He's also asking in general that why don't mitzvahs themselves do it? Why do they need Abba b'chol meidecha and Mesiras Nefesh? And you're saying, why don't Mitzvayim do it without Abba b'chol meidecha? You're asking the same question.
My question is that Mitzvayim is, even though that there's no Abba b'chol meidecha, still this.
Still what?
Still, you're going and you're asking people to do the.
So 1 second. How do you, first of all, how do you know that it's Amshacha? That's the whole mimer here. That's what he's talking about. Mitzvahs are mamshich from Rotzna Elyon. So he's asking, so why do you need Abba b'chol meidecha? Anyway, I don't know. We're going in circles here.
No. It's mashma from here that if you don't have the Abba b'chol meidecha, then you don't.
That's
have
his question. That's not mashma. He says it explicitly. It's not mashma. He says it and he's asking that question. Am I missing something? The guys are listening to this.
Okay.
He's not mashma. He's saying explicitly that you don't have it, and he's asking why. If mitzvahs themselves are mamshich rotzna elyon, like he says, are mitzvahs rotzna elyon, so why don't they do it? Why do you need the hagdama of Abba b'chol meidecha? Okay. Acha inyan hu. This is now the answer. Again, he doesn't say an answer. He says acha inyan. He's going to explain the whole inyan. So we're going to get now a new deeper dimension, the whole understanding of this process of our avodah. The inyan of this is the inyan is barely ill, because now it was explained earlier. The hamshacha shayidei mitzvahs, that the hamshacha through mitzvahs, we learned what makes them so powerful. Who mitzad mailas hakelim is due to the quality, the advantage, the superiority of the containers. And we're going now back to where he spoke and asked that question that I just read to you at the bottom of page 1266. So on 1267, he said, that even though the mitzvahs are kelim, like he said, evarim de malka, these are the limbs of the king. So they're the kelim, the evarim. But because these kelim, milas kelim, liyas da mitzvahs hem b'chinas kelim, like he explained on 1267, the mitzvahs are the level of kelim. V'kelim b'shoshen kodmu l'sheirish eiris. And the kelim, their root, they precede the root of the eiris. And he explained that at length back on 1267 and 1268. All the way through 1271. So he explained all that until 1271. That the Kelim reveal a deeper level of Atzmus. The Helam Atzmi, he said, the Oyer, the Etzema Oyer, Atzmus Mhusa Oyer. And then the Helam Oyer, and then the Helam Atzmi, especially on page 1270. We spoke about how the Oyer, even though it's also distant from Atzmus, but it makes sense that God should reveal himself through Oyer. But to reveal himself through Kelim, which don't reveal, that's a bigger kol yochel of Yechelis Atzmus. This is all back on page 1270, or I say 1267 and on, till 1271. So this is a long discussion. If you need more explanation on this point, I would suggest reviewing those pages. He's just summing it up. So he says, so we learned that the mitzvahs, their maila is because it's mitzad mailas hakelim, which is higher than the root. The root of the kelim is higher than the root of the oir. The root of the oir and the root of the kelim. Because by poil, the oir is a higher gilui. But in the root of it all, the root of the kelim is higher than the root of the oir. Valkain, and therefore, al yedei ha-mitzvahs, that's why through mitzvahs, meir, sheiresh ha-kelim, now when a person does mitzvahs, what is radiating is the root of the kelim, shezeh mechus va'atzmus ha'ein sof. That's the mechus and atzmus of Ein Sof. That's the exact words he used on the top of page 1268 and on. Yeah, mechus va'atzmus ha'ein sof. Whereas the Eir is his pashtus ha'Eir. Yeah. Yeah, page 1268, yeah. So that's what your mamshich through mitzvahs. Well, l'cheira ain't a moving. Now the Rebbe Rashab is now going back to that point and is going to ask a question on this. So a question is going to answer a question, obviously. He's going to ask a question to understand that, and that will help us understand the role of Abba b'chol meidecha Mesiras Nefesh, and why Maisa Mitzvos alone is not enough. L'cheira ain't a moving, asked the Rebbe Rashab. Seemingly not understood. Haloi hakelim d'ishtalshelus gamkin kodmu b'sharshin ela eris. Why do you need mitzvahs for this purpose? The kelim of ishtalshelus, not even the mitzvahs of the Eibishter, kelim in Atzilus, let's say, or kelim of any level, are also rooted, are also precede b'sharshin, the root higher than the ela eris. The lechena kelim mamshichim esair. That's why kelim have the power to draw from the eir. Like the example Chassidus gives, I don't know if he's going to give it here. That when you see, for example, when your keli, your eye is healthy, it draws your vision into it. Hepech shezeu hepech tivoi. Eir on its own is tivoi laliyah. It's tivoi lalis, as the Alter Rebbe explains in chapter 19 in Tanya. Chassidus elaborates. Eir on its own, like fire, goes upward. It's only the wick that keeps it grounded. So the eir on its own would be in a state of rotze, going upward. The fact that kelim have the power to draw down energy against its nature is because the shadish of kelim everywhere is deeper than the root of the eir, so it has power that the eir responds to. The teva eir hulalis ulichla b'mkele. The nature of eir on its own, of energy, light, flame, is to elevate, is to ascend, and to be encompassed in its source. That's what eir wants. As was explained earlier at length, yes, at length, quite at length, in volume 1 and volume 2, I remember at least maybe 4 or 5 big sections in Ayin Beis. When I say big, I mean for pages on, that he spoke about the bittul, the eir, its nature to go upward and be encompassed in its source. As a matter of fact, in Dvarim Ayin Gimel, he actually spoke about 3 reasons that the eir does that. Another Maimorim in Ayin Beis. So it was elaborated at length. So since the eir, its nature is to go upward, why is the eir not more powerful than the keli? How is the possible? And you see the keli can affect and impact the eir, that it should be in a state of being drawn downward, even though its nature is to go upward. And how is that possible? The zehu, and this is due to the fact that's because the root of the keli precedes the eir, the shorsha min hareshimu. Because the root of the keli, its root is in the reshimu, and the reshimu is higher than the kav. If you remember, he spoke at length. The reshimu is higher than the kav. The tzimtzum didn't affect it. It carries the whole energy from before the tzimtzum. The eir was concealed in the tzimtzum, and the reshimu was not. The reshimu itself is a state of concealment, but the tzimtzum didn't impact it, so it carries the koyach halaki that's higher than eir. Kumash is barley ill. This again we learned on page. This goes on page 1268 and 1269 and 1270. Is where he discussed the mile of the Rishima on the Kav. So this is about all kelim. So why do we say that only mitzvahs do this? One second, what's that? Commission is barley. So now we've established that all kelim have this power. And nevertheless, and nevertheless, even though the keli does have the power because it's stronger than the eir in its root, not in a revealed way, in its root, it has the power to draw down the eir, but it doesn't draw down etzema eir. It only draws down the eir of seder ishtalshlus, the eir that relates to existence. The eina meir sherish shemakar keli, and the sherish and the root and source of the keli is not radiating. In other words, the gili of the Rishimu doesn't happen. It's because of the power of the Rishimu that's rooted at such a high level. That's why the Oyer can draw down. That's why the Keli can draw down the Oyer. But it's only the Oyer of Seder Shtalshus. It's not that which is higher than Seder Shtalshus, which is the Rishimu. The Eich. So the Rebbe Rashab is asking, Ve'eich ha'yedei ha'mitzvos nimshach sheresh ha'keli. So then how is it that through mitzvahs, you could draw down something that the kelim themselves don't draw down, which is the sheresh ha'keli? So the question is really two parts. First question is, why do you say mitzvahs have this power? All kelim have this power. And then you say that the kelim only have the power to draw the Erev Seder Shtalshus, but the mitzvahs can go all the way to the root of the keli and reveal that. Why is that the case? Why do mitzvahs have something that the kelim don't have, when the mitzvahs are the level of kelim? So that's his question. Before I continue, actually, I'll probably stop here because does everyone understand the question that was asked here? You want me to clarify further? Okay, so I'm going to stop here because I don't want to start learning it all and do it quickly. We want to learn it patiently, but I will give you a little preview. The preview is he's going to answer that there's two different things the keli can do. It can draw down energy, which also comes from a very powerful place, its root, but it's not about transforming the keli into likus. The keli has a power to draw down oil. But if you want to transform the keli, that's where you're going to need mitzvahs, and you're going to need the mitzvahs also that are going to be need Abba b'chol me'edecha, because you're talking about transformation. If you're talking just about drawing divine energy, yeah, a mitzvah draws the etzem, but it's not going to be in a way that transforms the keli. In order to transform the keli, you have to be engaged in it. So if a person does mitzvahs technically and mechanically, yes, they're touching the Ratzon Elyon itself. But you can't say it's elikus on your terms. It's elikus. You're giving Hashem nachas, but you have not been refined. It would be like just like a person who is a rosh of a tevlai and does a mitzvah. So yes, he's doing a great thing, but the person has not become a godly person. And the goal here is not just gili ha'oid, it's hafichas hakeli, the ein oid, as we're going to learn. It's transforming the helam of the tzimtzum and transforming the keli and the rishimu into a revelation of the divine. Not just to say it's rooted in the deepest levels, but it's actually manifests. And for that, you need a lot more than just the idea that the keli is rooted. That's essentially what he's going to go with this, but he's going to elaborate much more, obviously. But that's briefly what is going to be explained. And of course, then understanding a whole different dimension, why Avodah is so necessary. Avodah is not just about revealing godliness, it's about transforming existence. And you can't transform existence just by doing a mitzvah, because you need the person. That's why you need b'chol nafshecha, b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol meidecha. You need us to be completely absorbed by it, or else it's not a dira b'tachtein. If a person just does a mitzvah, yes, you're bringing the Ratzon Elyon, but a dira b'tachtein means the whole dachtein, this whole material world, is saturated with godliness in a revealed way. Look, we're just seeing the tragedies are happening, what happened in Israel this week, and so on. You could have people doing a lot of mitzvahs, but doesn't mean that they're not munuvolim, which means they're not obnoxious, despicable human beings. Why? Because it didn't permeate them. So yes, we're doing a mitzvah. Everyone who does a mitzvah brings God into this world. But are you on that level? Has it permeated you? And Mashiach and L'Osed Lavi is not just doing a mitzvah. It's the product, the result of these mitzvahs. Schar mitzvah, like we've been learning, with the Gili Yudke is without any garments. And that means it has to completely consume us and permeate and completely saturate us. And that's going to be the real ultimate goal. That's what he's going to be discussing. So we'll learn it inside. But this is the Rebbe Rashab now asking these questions, is setting the stage to explain it in this fashion. Okay. So we'll stop here at the bottom of page 1281. And it's going to be quite fascinating, this next section, because it's really going to bring together all these pieces in a full glory way, where we start seeing the real, what Chassidus contributes of not just Hamshachas Atzmus, but Atzmus becoming one with us. That we can say that we, on our terms, have also become united with the divine. Not just that we're drawing it down. Okay, so we'll stop here.